Good morning. This is the first lecture of this course which is being given on mathematics in India from Vedic period to modern times. It is a novel course which tries to trace the way mathematics developed in India. The first talk is an overview talk. In this I will try to highlight those periods where there was a significant development of mathematics in India. I will also try to summarize the special nature of mathematics as it developed in India. I would like to, for instance, emphasize the algorithmic way in which most problems in mathematics were considered in the Indian tradition. So, I am flashing the outline, not going to read it out. You can just see the kind of topics we are going to cover. We will cover the development of Indian mathematics in the ancient period, indicate some highlights during that period. Then the early classical period, say 500 BCE to 500 CE, which culminated in the work of Aryabhatta. Then the development of mathematics in the later classical period from 500 in the common era to 1250. We will then go to some glimpses of the highlights of what happened during the medieval period till about 1850. Towards the end we will discuss something about the nature of mathematics in India, how mathematics was understood, how results were proved and things like that. And then about the contemporary period we will speak a little bit about Srinivas Ramanujan, finally an overview of the history. So, one of the standard quotes on mathematics in India is this following statement from the Ganita Sara Sangraha of Mahaviracharya. It is a long 6-verse statement, perhaps you will hear again when Mahaviracharya's Ganita Sara Sangraha is going to be discussed. It starts by saying that mathematics is important in all areas and finally concludes by saying Bahubhihi Vipralapaihi Kim Trailokye Sacharachare Yatkinchit Vastu Tatsarvam Ganitena Vinanahi. In the whole of the three worlds there is nothing that is not pervaded by mathematics. So, that is the kind of statement that Mahaviracharya is making, whether is it in astronomy or be it in architecture or be it in conjunction of planets, position, time, course of moon, logic, poetry, grammar. So, it is just a all purpose statement of Mahaviracharya that mathematics pervades all aspects, all subjects. This is a quotation from the 9th century work called Ganita Sara Sangraha of Mahaviracharya. So, Ganita stands for calculation, computation. Ganyate Sankhyayate Tad Ganitam is a statement due to Ganesha Daivagnya, he is a commentator of Leelavati. And therefore, we can expect that Indian mathematical texts really abound in rules to describe systematic and efficient procedures for calculation. Just to give you an example, we will go to a very ancient rule. This is given by Bhaskara 1. This is in his commentary to Aryabhatiya. It is just a rule for calculating the square of a number. Antyapadasya vargam kritva dvigunam tadeva antyapadam sheshapadai Utsaryotsarya Varga Vidhau. So, we can see the kind of calculation he is talking about. You take any number 125, first you square the last number, multiply the other two numbers by 2 and the last number. So, you get this row, then move away, remove one digit, square the next number, multiply by 2 and that number, the next row, and finally square the last number, remove one more number, add all of them. The important thing to realize is even this very ancient rule written in 629 AD actually uses n into n minus 1 by 2 multiplications to calculate the square of a number. An n digit number multiplied by another n digit number will have n squared multiplications, but since we are squaring the same number, this 2ab factor comes in, and so you are having an optimal algorithm for squaring. This is the way Indian mathematicians always try to give the best possible way of the best possible procedure for doing a calculation. Now, the word algorithm itself has a history. It was the name given to the Indian methods of doing calculation, and it originates from the name of a Central Asian mathematician called Al-Khwarizmi, who in the 9th century wrote a book on Indian methods of calculation, that is methods of calculation using the decimal place value system, and that book was called Hisab al-Hindi. Latin versions of that book is available, the original Arabic version is not available, and this was the book that introduced the decimal place value notation to the Arabic world and later on to the European world. And so the people who followed this way of calculation were called algorithmists, and the word algorithm comes from Al-Khwarizmi. And this algorithmic approach is not something very specific to mathematics. In fact, it pervades all Indian sciences. Most of Indian disciplines, shastras as we call them, they do not present a series of propositions. They normally give you a set of rules, a set of procedures which tell you how to systematically accomplish something. So, the rules given in shastras are usually called as vidhi, kriya, prakriya, sadhana, karma, parikarma, karana, these are the names, and these rules are what are usually formulated as sutras. So, the disciplines, the technical disciplines in India, they provide systematic rules of procedure rather than a set of propositions. And of course, the most canonical such systematic text in India is the great grammar written by Panini called Ashtadhyayi. In fact, most other disciplines and especially mathematics is extensively influenced by the method of Panini. His use of symbolic and technical devices, recursive and generative formalism, and the system of conventions that govern rule application and rule interaction, all this go back to Panini, and it has had a deep influence even on the modern discipline of linguistics. In fact, many scholars actually acknowledge that the place Panini holds in Indian tradition is something analogous to the place Euclid holds in the Greco-European tradition. And here is a quotation from Stahl, where he is saying Panini is also deriving systematically Sanskrit utterances from a set of rules, and Euclid is also deriving a set of propositions from a collection of axioms. But the word deriving will have two different meanings in these two contexts. Panini is actually generating valid utterances of Sanskrit, he is not proving theorems. Euclid is demonstrating, is proving theorems in mathematics from a set of postulates. So, in the ancient period, the earliest texts in mathematics available are the texts on construction of fire altars, the Vedis. These are the Shulva Sutras, these are the oldest texts of geometry in the world. They give procedures for construction and transformation of geometrical figures. Then there are ancient astronomical Siddhantas which deal with astronomy. When we come to the classical period, starting from Panini, we then have the Chandas Sutra of Pingala, which initiated combinatorics. We have some mathematics in the Jaina tradition, in the Jaina text. Then more crucially, the idea of zero and the decimal place value system developed in this period, and all this culminated in the mathematics and astronomy that is found in the text Aryabhatiya of Aryabhata, which was written in 499 of the Common Era. Most of the standard procedures in arithmetic, algebra, geometry, trigonometry were perfected, and many more things which were used in astronomy like the indeterminate equations, sine tables, all these things were perfected by the time of Aryabhata. So, the ancient Shulva Sutras deal with lot of things: units of measurement, marking directions, construction of rectangles, squares, trapezia, transformation of squares, and it has the first oldest statement of geometry, the theorem which we attribute to Pythagoras commonly. It is called the Bhuja Koti Karna Nyaya in later Indian mathematical texts. It is the sum of the two sides of a rectangle, the squares, sum of the squares of two sides of a rectangle is equal to the square of the diagonal. This is the rule as stated in Bodhayanas Shulba Sutra. Dirgha chaturashrasya akshnaya rajjuhu parshvamani tiryangmani cha yak prithak bhute kurutaha tat ubhayam karoti. There are even more complicated rules of adding squares. Then there is a rule for approximate conversion of a square into a circle, which leads to a value of pi around 3.08. Then there is a very interesting formula for the square root of 2. It is called the Dvikarani, and it is accurate up to several decimal places, as you can see. Finally, all this geometry is used in constructing altars. This is the rule in Katyayana Shulba Sutra. The problem is how to construct a square which is n times the area of a given square, and Katyayana Shulba Sutra gives the very interesting geometrical formula: n plus 1a by 2 whole square minus n minus 1a by 2 whole square is na square. It is using this very interesting algebraic result to calculate the side of a square which is n times in area of the given square. Pingala's Chandas Sutra ushered in combinatorics, and this is a very interesting diagram known as the Meru Prastara, which appears in Pingala's Chandas Sutra. It gives you the what we now call as the binomial coefficients NCR. They arise very naturally when you want to count how many meters are there which have n syllables, but in which r number of gurus appear. That is NCR, as we shall see later. The decimal place value system arose in the ancient period. The main thing about the decimal place value system is that it is essentially an algebraic concept. The number 5203 written as 5 times 10 cubed, 2 times 10 squared and 0 times 10 plus 3 is something akin to an algebraic polynomial 5x cubed 2x squared plus 0x plus 3. It is this algebraic feature of place value system that enabled the Indian mathematicians to give systematic and very interesting procedures for making calculations, and they became the standard methods of calculation all the world over. Sometimes the Indian books do give some special techniques also, which are essentially originating out of the place value system. For instance, the commentary Buddhi Vilasini of Ganesha Daivagya on Leelavati, it discusses what is currently popularly known as the Vajrabhyasa method of multiplication, vertical and crosswise method of multiplication. The history of decimal place value system goes back to the Vedas. They use the system to the base 10 very naturally. The Upanishads talk of 0 and infinity. Panini's Ashtadhyayi has a notion of lopa, which is akin to what is called a zero phoneme, zero morpheme in linguistics. There is this idea of shunya in the Bauddha philosophy, the idea of abhava in the Nayayika philosophy. Pingala's Chandas Sutra uses 0 as a marker. It is not clear whether at that time the idea of 0 as a number was known. Now, soon enough the idea of place value system became so common that philosophical works such as Vasumitra's Buddhist text and even commentaries on Yoga Sutra started explaining the speciality of the place value system. Here is a quotation from the Vyasa Bhashya on Yoga Sutras. Yathaika rekha shatasthane shatam dashasthane dasha eka cha ekasthane yata chaikatvepi stri mata chochiyate duhita cha swasacheti. Just as a lady is understood as a mother, daughter-in-law or a sister, a line which appears at different places, that is number 1, which appears at different places will have different values, 100 or 10. So, like this issue became well known in the circles of philosophy also and got discussed. And one of the oldest places where the place value system occurs explicitly is in a book called Vriddha Yavana Jataka, written by Sphuji Dvaja around 270 in the Common Era. And by the time of Aryabhatta's Aryabhatiya, all calculations were formulated with the place value system. Here is an inscription in Gwalior which is giving the number 270. I think it is appearing here, and there are many inscriptions in Southeast Asia, in Java and various other places around early 7th century, which give numbers in the place value system with 0 also. Now, this Indian place value system was acclaimed universally. This is a statement in the 7th century by a Syrian bishop, Severus Sebokht, who is sort of saying that the Greeks seem to think too much of themselves, but they really do not know the basic methods of calculation that the Indians have discovered, and they better know that there are others who also know something of science. Here is Ibn Sina, a very famous philosopher in the West Asian region in 10th century. He is saying that he learned the methods of calculation, the Indian methods of calculation, from a vegetable vendor. So, this was the way that the place value system really revolutionized calculation all over the world. This is more modern quotation by Laplace and Gauss saying that this is indeed one of the most wonderful discoveries in the history of mathematics. Now, by the time when we come to Aryabhatiya in 500 CE, it discusses the what is called as parikarma logistics, methods of calculation, square, square root, cube, cube root, areas of triangle, circle, trapezia, approximate value of pi, computing sine tables, problems to do with the intercepted arcs in a circle, progressions, rule of 3, arithmetic of fractions, and finally something very interesting called as Kuttakara, which was perhaps Aryabhata's own invention, which is the method of solving linear indeterminate equation. So, this is the kind of sine table that Aryabhata came up with, and it has later on been systematically improved in India. This is by Govindaswamy in 9th century, and this improved table is due to Madhava. When we come to the later period, we have luminaries like Varahamihira, Bhaskara, who wrote commentaries on Aryabhata, Brahmagupta, one of the most celebrated mathematicians of India. In Varahamihira's Brihat Samhita, which is a compendium, there is a chapter on perfumery, and there he is introducing combinatorics ideas, and he is explaining that 1820 various perfumes can be found by choosing 4 out of a collection of 16, and to calculate the 16 C4 he gives a different kind of a Meru Prastara. He is giving a different kind of a table. Here the first column natural integers, the second column sum of natural integers, the third column is the sum of sums of natural integers, fourth column is and it is based upon the recurrence relation, which is equivalent to Pingala's recurrence relation. Brahmasputa Siddhanta of Brahmagupta, it is a text on astronomy. It has 2 chapters in mathematics. Chapter 12 is called 13 is called Ganitadhyaya, and chapter 17 is called Kuttakadhyaya. Chapter 12 is Ganitadhyaya, 17 is Kuttakadhyaya. Kuttakadhyaya deals with most ideas in algebra. In Brahmagupta, you will for the first time find the arithmetic of negative quantities, calculations with 0, and then detailed treatment of equations, and even introduction of complicated equations known as the Varga Prakriti, which became a very important equation in the Indian mathematical tradition. Brahmagupta also gave very interesting results, such as this equation for the diagonals of a cyclic quadrilateral, a quadrilateral which is inscribed in a circle. He gave a formula for the diagonals of a cyclic quadrilateral in terms of the sides, and an expression for the area of the cyclic quadrilateral, which is a generalization of the formula that perhaps all of you know as the Heron's formula for the area of a triangle. Brahmagupta of course mentioned that this formula is applicable to quadrilaterals and triangles. He gave some interesting properties of equations of this kind. These are called the Varga Prakriti equation. He was the first person to formulate a property called as bhavana, that given one solution you can go to another solution. We will discuss this later during the course. But this enabled later on Indian mathematicians to work out a very systematic algorithm. This is one of the most famous algorithms in Indian mathematics called as the Chakravada, and it enables you to solve equations. This is a very famous problem, x squared minus 61 y squared is equal to 1. you have to solve for x and y in integers, and as you can see the solutions are about 1.7 trillion and 226 million. So, these are very high numbers. This is the lowest solution of this equation. After Bhaskaracharya, who in his book in 1150 solved this equation by a very simple method, this table tells you the method. This problem again came up 500 years later when Fermat posed this as a problem to the British mathematicians. Ideas of calculus started developing, and they arose in the context of astronomy. The idea of instantaneous velocity became important, because especially to understand the motion of moon, one needed to know the rate of variation of its position, and one found that even the rate of change of its position was continuously changing, and the idea of instantaneous velocity arose this way. Now, there was a common misconception till 50-60 years ago in modern times that Bhaskaracharya II in 1150 AD was the last important mathematician in Indian mathematics. Afterwards, people were just repeating what was done in the earlier books, or they had forgotten mathematics altogether. It is only in the last 50-60 years that the works of later mathematicians have been studied and understood, and actually the picture is quite different. First of all, around 1200 works in mathematics started appearing in regional languages. Ganita Sara Kaumudi is in Prakrit, Vyavahara Ganita is in Kannada, Pavuluri Ganitamu is in Telugu. These are very important works written around 13th century, 12th century. Ganita Kaumudi of Narayana Pandita is a great advance of Bhaskaracharya's Leelavati. A large part of our course will be devoted to a study of that. Then there arose a school in Kerala which had very special contributions to make, the Kerala School of Astronomy, initiated by Madhava, then Parameshwara, then Neelakantha Somayaji. They revised the older astronomical models and came up with a new astronomical model, but Madhava is more well known for his discovery of infinite series for pi, sine and cosine, and the proofs of all these results of Madhava were written down in a very famous Malayalam book called Yukti Bhasha, written in 1530. Mathematics continued in Maharashtra and Kashi with scholars such as Gyanaraja, Ganesha Daivagya, Surya Dasa. They wrote proofs on Bhaskara's results. Trigonometrical results were discovered by Munishwara Kamalakara. Savai Jaisimha in Jaipur, he built these 5 observatories which were very important at that time to correct the older astronomical calculations. The Kerala School of Astronomy also continued. The last work was Shankaravarman's Sadratnamala in 1830. There was an astronomer called Chandrasekhar Samanta in Orissa, who in fact gave by traditional methods all the major lunar inequalities in 1869. So, just to tell you the kind of work, Narayana Pandita even considered topics like magic squares as serious mathematical topics, and came up with very interesting way of constructing magic squares, several very new algorithms. This is what is called as the folding method of calculating magic squares. This is the infinite series for the ratio of the circumference to diameter discovered by Madhava, the Kerala mathematician. He not only discovered the infinite series, that is a very slowly convergent series, that 1 minus 1 by 3 plus 1 by 5 minus 1 by 7. If you calculate 50 terms of that series, you get only 1 decimal place in the expansion of pi. So, Madhava at the same time gave what are known as the end correction terms. So, this is the first end correction term due to Madhava. Then there is another end correction terms. It is these end correction terms which give you more accurate and more accurate results, even if you sum only 50 terms in the Madhava series. Incidentally, that series due to Madhava is also known as the Leibniz series. It was rediscovered by Leibniz in 1674. So, using his correction, Madhava was able to give the value of pi correctly to 11 decimal places just by using 50 terms in his series with the end correction term. So, we can briefly sketch this history of pi as typical of the way mathematics developed across different cultures. We see Aryabhata's value 3.1416, which is accurate up to 4 decimal places, the Shulva Sutra value which is accurate up to 1 decimal places, the Jain texts use root 10, Archimedes gave this standard inequality 310 by 71 less than pi less than 3 1 by 7. The Chinese mathematician Su Chong-chi had this 355 by 113, which is accurate up to nearly 6 to 7 decimal places. But after this we see Madhava coming up with 11 decimal places between Aryabhatta to Madhava. Then Madhava's result was based upon infinite series. Most of these results are actually based upon brute force calculation with approximating the area of a circle by polygons, Al-Kashi, Viete, etc. Newton again came up with an infinite series around 1665. Then there are various other things, but we can see in recent times Ramanujan in 1914 came up with a very interesting series for pi using modular equation, and that created a small record at that time at 1980s, that people calculated pi to about 17 million decimal places. Today's achievement is about 5 trillion. But equally important are these exact results for pi. You can see Madhava has all these exact results, which were later on repeated by others. James Gregory's tan inverse series, Leibniz series, Sharp series, all these are contained in Madhava's work. This is the series given by Ramanujan in his 1914 paper. The idea of instantaneous velocity also led to more complicated derivatives. The derivative of sine function as a cosine function was well known by the time of Bhaskara. Nilakantha is formulating the derivative of the sine inverse function as 1 over square root of 1 minus x squared in these words. Now again till about 50-60 years ago, people had studied only, the modern scholars had studied only the basic texts of Indian mathematics. So they had the sort of idea that Indians somehow enunciated lot of results, but they did not seem to have any method for arriving at these results, or at least those methods were very obscure. So it is only in the last 50-60 years that many of the commentaries to the original texts people started studying. Traditionally such issues, that how to obtain results, how to understand them, etc., have been dealt with in detailed bhashyas or commentaries. This is not just true for mathematics, that if you pick up any basic text, even Bhagavad Gita, to understand it in a very serious manner, you have to take recourse to the detailed commentaries which are written on them. And these commentaries continued to be written till recent times. They played a very vital role in the traditional scheme of learning. As far as mathematics is concerned, it is in these commentaries that we find what are known as upapattis or yuktis. They are something similar to demonstrations or rationale or proofs in mathematics. One of the oldest works, available works, which has upapattis is Bhaskara I's commentary on Aryabhatiya. But of course the most detailed exposition of upapattis is found in the Malayalam text Yuktibhasha, written in 1530. Now as regards upapatti, what was a upapatti supposed to do? What is the nature of this? This is best captured by this verse of Bhaskara. Upapattim vina praudhim prauda sabhasu naiti ganako. Without the proof, a mathematician will not be considered as a scholarly mathematician in any assembly of mathematicians. Nissamshayona swayam, nor will he be free of any doubts regarding the results that he is enunciating. So it is for this reason that I am going to discuss upapattis or proofs. That is what Bhaskara is explaining in his commentary on Siddhanta Shiromani. The same point is repeated. Of course Ganesha is a follower in the tradition of Bhaskara. He is writing a commentary on Lilavati in 1540 explaining these proofs. Again, nirbhranto va ritetam suganaka sadasi praudhatam naiti chayam, that a person who does not know upapattis will not be without confusion, nor will he be considered as a serious mathematician. Now, so the basic purpose of upapatti is sort of clearly stated to be to remove confusion and doubt regarding the validity and to obtain assent in the community. It is something like sending a paper and getting it peer refereed and getting it published. It does not mean that that result is going to stand for all times, for all ages. That was the ideal of proof in the Greco-European tradition. That does not seem to be the kind of ideal that the Indians are enunciating while doing mathematics. In fact, a detailed study of proofs in Indian mathematics shows that there are fundamental differences between the idea of proof as we know from the Greco-European tradition and the idea of upapatti in Indian mathematics. First of all, the Indian mathematicians are very clear that proofs are needed, upapattis are needed. A result, even if verified in hundreds of cases, does not mean that it is proved in mathematics. So, only when you can give some logical argument or some other argument can you say that it is a valid mathematical result. And several commentaries are written listing such upapattis, and the upapattis, like as we know proofs in modern mathematics, they are written in a sequence that you go from known result to newer result and from them to later result. So, you have a sequence of establishing results, and the understanding is that it is by giving proofs we are clear how the result is to be applied and understood. The proofs may many times depend upon experimentation. This is something which is new. We may be doing it in our mathematics teaching, but the Euclidean ideal of proof is that the proof is something which is very abstract and should not be dependent on experimentation, should not be dependent on even our understanding of what is the nature of the mathematical objects. But the Indian proofs were always they could involve experimentation, they could involve an understanding of the explicit use of the nature of the objects. Another crucial thing is that what is called the proof by contradiction, the tarka it is called in Indian mathematics, that was employed. This reductio ad absurdum was employed to understand the non-existence of certain mathematical quantities, but it was not employed to establish the existence of a mathematical object whose existence would not otherwise be accessible to us by any other means. So, tarka was not considered as an independent pramana. So, existence of quantities cannot be established by merely proving that their non-existence is inconsistent with whatever we know, but by giving a means or an access to the way their existence can be understood by us. This is something known as the constructive philosophy in today's mathematics, and there is no ideal that proofs will give irrefutable demonstration or will give us the absolute truth of a mathematical proposition. There were no idea that you fix one set of postulates once and for all and derive all the results. And while so many symbolisms and symbolic techniques were used, formalization of mathematics was not something that was attempted in Indian mathematics. Now, coming to more contemporary times, this issue of proof became something very crucial in understanding the mathematics of Srinivasa Ramanujan. When Ramanujan sends his results in 1913 in a long letter to Hardy, which had more than 120 results, Hardy immediately responds by saying, this is all fine, this is looking very interesting, but where are the proofs? You please send me the proofs of all these results. Of course, they were not so trivial that Hardy could prove it for himself straight away on a piece of paper or something like that. So, he demanded the proofs be given, and Ramanujan, there is a very famous letter he sends to Hardy in 1913 saying that he has a systematic method for deriving all the results, but that cannot be explained in a short communication, and he thinks that he has a new methodology for doing things, and he anyway, but he says that why do not you check some of these results and be convinced that what I am writing is valid, and that should convince you that there is something interesting in what I am doing. Now, the issue is important because for instance, there is this notebook of Ramanujan, which is the set of all results that he noted prior to going to England, and later analysis in the last 25-30 years shows that there are more than 3,000 results these notebooks contain. Hardy initially thought that 2/3 of them were already well known, but now the understanding is more than 2/3 were not known at the time Ramanujan was recording these results in the notebook, and almost all the results are correct, perhaps no more than 5 to 10 are incorrect. This is the current assessment of the results that Ramanujan wrote down in his notebook. There is of course a notebook of the work that he was doing in the last year of his life, 1919 to 20, which was lost seemingly, and it was recovered in 1975 in the Trinity College library by Professor G. Andrews. It is called the Lost Notebook, and results in that are still being established by the mathematicians of present day, and this contains whole lot of results like this. So, what I was trying to say was that the Greco-European tradition of mathematics almost equates mathematics with proof, and the way mathematical results are discovered therefore is hardly understood. It is vaguely termed as intuition, natural genius, etc. And there is an understanding that mathematical results are non-empirical, and therefore there is no access to them except by rigorous logical argumentation. Of course, there are philosophers of mathematics who do argue that this philosophy of mathematics is confusing or barren. This philosophy does not explain most of the history of mathematics, the way mathematics is done. Either it was done in earlier times or even the way mathematics is being done presently. In the Indian tradition, the understanding was that proof is only one of the aspects of mathematics. It is important. Mathematical results were not thought of to be non-empirical. Mathematics was not thought of to be a science different from other sciences. Its results were equally contestable and falsifiable, and they could be validated in diverse ways. Proof was important, but they were more for obtaining assent for one's results. So, the process of mathematical discovery and the mathematical justification are in some unison in the way the Indians have understood mathematics. Long time ago, when Ramanujan's letter arrived in England, the confusion that Hardy and Littlewood had, Bertrand Russell wrote to one of his friends that Hardy and Littlewood seem to have discovered a second Newton in a Hindu clerk, but if some comparison is to be made regarding Ramanujan, he is more in the line of Madhava, both in the kind of topics like infinite series, transformations of them, continued fractions and transformations of them, handling iterations. He is indeed a successor of the great genius Madhava, who was one of the pioneers of calculus. I have tried to extract a review of a recent book on mathematics in India by Professor David Mumford, the well known Fields medalist. The main point Professor Mumford is trying to emphasize that by studying Indian mathematics or the history of mathematics in India, what one can understand is that indeed mathematics can be done in different ways. The muse of mathematics can be wooed in many different ways, and her secrets teased out of her, and so they were in India. And one should not just confuse the fact that absence of rigorous mathematics in the Greek style means that the rest is not mathematics at all. And he cautions that most of interesting mathematics that we use today, which was developed in 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, was indeed done by abandoning the Greek canon of doing mathematics. This is the kind of understanding that scholars are arriving at the importance of knowing a different tradition of mathematics like the Indian tradition. Another very interesting thing is the question of the history of science in recent times, that ever since the work of Needham, it has generally been understood that till 16th century the Chinese science and technology seemed to be in considerable advance over science and technology in Europe. And then after Needham's work, the question that Needham almost made it an important focus was why modern science did not emerge in China and did not emerge in non-Western societies. Now, when we study mathematics in India, for instance, we notice that many of hallmarks of modern science, such as development of calculus, infinite series, etc., or development of new astronomical models of the planetary system, they were all there in the Kerala work of 14th, 15th, 16th century. So, a very crucial question that we should understand is why science did not flourish in non-Western societies after 16th century. And it is even more important for today's purpose to have some idea of how science would have developed, how the science today could have been if the non-Western societies had continued developing science along the lines that they had laid down for themselves earlier, maybe with many modifications, maybe with some transformations in interaction with the modern science developed in the Europe and subsequent times. It is only by that kind of speculation we can come to some understanding of the great geniuses of modern times in India, such as Ramanujan, Bose, Prafulla Chandra Ray, or Raman, and many others. So, to summarize the development of mathematics in India, that the main thing was that the complex mathematical problems were not shunned. Even if complete solutions to them were not found, approximate less than perfect solutions were accepted and then developed into better and better solutions. And the idea was always was in simplicity of mathematical procedure, and by this Indians were able to do quite a bit. They could get the basic theorems of plane geometry by the time of Shulva Sutras. They could establish most of our arithmetic, algebra, geometry and trigonometry by the time of Aryabhatta. By the time of Bhaskara too, they could solve complicated quadratic indeterminate equations, or by 14th-15th century calculus, exact series for sine and very accurate sine tables, which are all very important, were found. So, the crucial thing is the explicitly algorithmic and computational nature of Indian mathematics, and this seems to have persisted till recent times, and to some extent Srinivas Ramanujan, as I told you, could be thought of as an inheritor of the traditional Indian methodology. And perhaps it is important that we should have a detailed understanding of the development of mathematics in India to understand the way Indians approached many complex problems even in other sciences. And needless to say, it is very important that we should teach the highlights of this great tradition of mathematics in to our students in schools and colleges, and I think courses like this will help in sort of formulating that kind of a work. So, with that I complete this initial overview, and thank you very much.